Three words: she got caught. She got caught. And we found the letter, and she didn't turn it over. And during committee, instead of saying, yeah, I signed the letter, and I shouldn't have done it, I don't believe that. First, she said she wasn't sure. And then she was sure. And then she didn't mean it. And then she'll make a pinky promise that she'll be a fair federal judge. These positions are for life. They're there forever. At a minimum, just because you've seen My Cousin Vinny doesn't qualify you to be on the federal bench. At a minimum, there ought to be a minimum level of integrity and a minimum level of adherence to the rule of law. And this lady sets a new standard. And I wish you didn't have to say that, but those are the facts.
Hey, what's up, Legal Eagles? Today we're diving into some serious courtroom drama, but this time it's not in a trial, it's in a Senate hearing. We've got Senator John Kennedy grilling judicial nominee Sarah Russell, and trust me, things get spicy. Let's break down this political showdown and see why it matters for all of us. So, picture this. Sarah Russell, hoping to become a federal judge, wrote a letter during the pandemic that's now coming back to haunt her. She basically told the governor of Connecticut, hey, let's empty out the prisons and stop locking people up. Now, I'm not taking sides here, but you can imagine how that might raise some eyebrows, right? She went full activist mode, talking about human rights and how the justice system affects marginalized communities. Now, whether you agree with her or not, you've got to admit, that's a pretty bold move for someone gunning for a judge's robe. Here's where it gets juicy. Senator Kennedy drops the bomb that Russell didn't even mention this letter during the nomination process. It's like applying for a job at McDonald's and forgetting to mention you used to run Burger King, you know? Kennedy's not having it. He's all, we had to find this ourselves and it took us like 7 minutes on Google. Ouch. Kennedy goes in hard, questioning whether Russell's even fit to be a judge. He's worried about how criminal defendants and prosecutors could trust her decisions given what she wrote. It's like if your referee used to play for the other team, you'd be a little suspicious, right? The senator's not buying Russell's change of heart either. He thinks she only backpedaled because she got caught. Kennedy's using this to talk about bigger issues like judicial independence and integrity. He's worried about what happens when judges don't stick to the law. It's like if the umpire in baseball suddenly decided stealing bases was cool, it changes the whole game, right?
During the pandemic. Here's what she said. Quote, as they stand, prisons and jails are detrimental to public health and human rights and disproportionately harm marginalized communities, including Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants, people with mental illness, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who use drugs, people engaged in sex work and street economies, and people experiencing houselessness and poverty. Then she went on to request the governor to immediately release everybody in jail in Connecticut. It's unclear to me whether she was talking about just during the pandemic or on a permanent basis. Then she goes on to tell the governor of Connecticut to stop putting people in jail. And it's still unclear to me whether she meant just for the duration of the pandemic or on an extended basis. And on top of all of that, the cherry on top, she didn't turn the letter over to the committee. I don't know why she didn't. Perhaps she thought, I'm not saying this is the case, she thought we wouldn't find it. It took about 7.3 minutes on Google to find it. Now, this is America. Ms. Russell has a constitutional right to believe in these things and to say those things. She does not have a constitutional right to be a federal judge. And she's not qualified to be a federal judge if those are her beliefs. How can any criminal defendant in front of her or any prosecutor in front of her think that they're getting a fair shake in light of this letter when she sentences someone to prison, if she ever does sentence someone to prison? It's just simply breathtaking. And for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be voting no.
Is the senator from Louisiana familiar with a concept called confirmation conversion? Kind of like a death
I
bed
would like to hear
conversion.
more about it, Senator.
Well, I'd just be interested, how can you reconcile the letter with what Senator Blumenthal, the senator from Connecticut, read as her disavowal of the letter? Did she express regret, or that she had misspoken, or that she now, on second thought, had different ideas? I'm trying to get my head around how do you reconcile this letter that you read from the statement that the senator from Connecticut
Well, Senator, here's how I reconcile it. 3 words: she got caught. She got caught. And we found the letter, and she didn't turn it over. And during committee, instead of saying, yeah, I signed the letter, and I shouldn't have done it, I don't believe that. First, she said she wasn't sure. And then she was sure. And then she didn't mean it. And then she'll make a pinky promise that she'll be a fair federal judge. These positions are for life. They're there forever. At a minimum, just because you've seen My Cousin Vinny doesn't qualify you to be on the federal bench. At a minimum, there ought to be a minimum level of integrity and a minimum level of adherence to the rule of law. And this lady sets a new standard. And I wish you didn't have to say that, but those are the facts.
Would the senator yield for one last question?
Of course.
Are you familiar with the fact that all federal judges are subject to a code of judicial conduct?
Yes, sir.
That would be all federal judges, correct?
Yes, sir.
Including members of the United States Supreme Court.
Yes, sir.
And is the senator aware of the fact that that code of judicial conduct that applies to all federal judges was actually promulgated in 1919?
Yes, sir. I understand that's the case.
And I'm trying to reconcile the chairman's statement that this code of judicial conduct that applies to the Supreme Court specifically, that was issued on November the 13th, that was the first time that members of the Supreme Court were subject to a code of judicial conduct. Isn't it the fact that the code of judicial conduct that applied to all federal judges applied to them as well?
Yes, sir.
And one of those, how can a litigant, a citizen accused of a crime, somebody who goes to court to seek vindication for a wrong done to them, how can they have any confidence whatsoever in a judge that won't tell the truth?
They can't. And shame on us for allowing someone like that to get on the federal bench.
Now, we've talked a little bit about judicial independence here. I think I agree with those people over time, over the last 230 years or so, who've said that the independence of the judiciary in the United States is a single most distinguishing feature of our form of government. Because ultimately, people are going to be held accountable, and not for political reasons, not because of their unpopular point of view, but because a judge in some court, perhaps with an appeal to an intermediate court and maybe the Supreme Court, has said, you were wrong and the other side was right. But we also said that these judges should be independent of politics. That's why they get lifetime appointments. That's why the Constitution says their salary cannot be diminished while they serve in office. So what recourse does a litigant, a citizen accused of a crime, or the prosecutor who's representing the state or perhaps the United States, what recourse do they have against somebody who's confirmed as a federal judge who won't tell the truth?
It's a mystery to me, and we're creating a real problem here, in my opinion, Senator. And a real problem for the efficient operation of our court. I mean, if I'm a criminal defendant or a criminal defense attorney, I'm going to do everything I can to try to get this lady as my judge. And if I'm a prosecutor, I'm going to try to avoid her, and I think this letter may very well be grounds for appeal in every single solitary case. I mean, she says it here. Big as Dallas. I don't believe in putting people in jail. If they're part of this particular group that she deems virtuous. Now, if you're not in her group of people that she deems underprivileged and virtuous, you're really at risk, apparently. But if you can fit yourself into, if you can somehow become black, brown, indigenous, an immigrant, people with mental illness, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who use drugs, if you can convince the judge that you have been engaged in sex work and street economies, or you are homeless or poor, then she thinks you should not be in jail.
I've heard it said that the single most powerful public official in the United States is a individual federal judge. Have you heard that?
Yes, sir. I think that's.
And what recourse does Congress have to a federal judge who blatantly disregards their obligations under the law? Do we have the authority to force them to recuse or disqualify them? Isn't it fact that given the constitutional independence of the judiciary, the sole recourse that Congress has, I'm not talking about the litigants, that Congress would have would be to impeach, for the House to impeach and the Senate to convict them in a court of impeachment. Isn't that right?
That is correct, and that's why I've always been so proud to sit on this committee, because our job is to stop people from getting on the bench who are whack jobs.
And that same limitation of remedy that Congress would have would also apply to a United States Supreme Court justice, correct?
Yes, sir.
Impeachment by the House, conviction in the Senate, and removal from office. That's the sole remedy, correct?
Yes, sir.
What we've seen here is a classic political showdown with real-world consequences. Whether Russell gets confirmed or not, this hearing highlights some serious questions about who we want judging our courts and how we hold them accountable. Remember, these judges serve for life. It's not like a bad hire at your local coffee shop. We can't just fire them if they mess up. So, next time you hear about judicial nominations, pay attention. It might seem boring, but trust me, it affects all of us more than we realize. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into legal drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more content like this. Until next time, stay sharp and stay informed.